Yeah, good evening. Anyway, we are doing, of course, Faithful to the End. This is 31 of the series, and we've done a lot of the minor prophets. Because God is faithful to the end to bring forth what He has promised. So, if you're at Micah 4, I'm just going to open in word of prayer. We're going to begin that. Lord, we just thank you for everything, and we ask that you just anoint your word and make it real to us. Help us to know where we fit in the scheme of things, Lord. We just thank you that you are God, and that you're in control, you're sovereign, and nothing surprises you, and nothing throws you off the game plan. And Lord, you're in the midst of the history and everything that's going on in this world today. And we are so thankful that we're on the winning side. And we just praise you for your love and your grace that you continue to show us as we journey through this world to the ultimate destination. And so we praise you for everything, and we say this in your name. Amen. Now, we've been considering, of course, as we look at Micah, he's dealt with the sins of Samaria and Jerusalem. And we have looked at the judgments coming at Samaria, which is very close at that time, and the pending judgment that will come at Judah. And of course, there's over 100 years difference between their downfalls as a kingdom. Now, these judgments are always in light of the second message that Micah is going to give. Remember, he gave three messages. One is prediction of judgment. The second one is prediction of the restored kingdom. Okay, it's all about the restoration of the kingdom, which we are looking at happening. It's very close. We've already seen all the Jewish people come back together, and it's prophesied here in Micah. And it would look impossible, because in Samaria they, as I said, dispersed everybody as far as the northern kingdom, but the southern kingdom, they kept them together, and that was the work of God, because it was Babylon instead of Assyria. And because they kept them together, the Jewish people, a remnant was able to return to Jerusalem 70 years later. And so it's pretty interesting to see how all this worked out, because if it had been the Assyrians, they would have been scattered. All the people of Judah would have been scattered throughout the known world. And so what we have here, of course, he's going to be talking about this pending judgment, but he's going to be doing it in light of the restoration. God doesn't condemn without bringing forth promises. Because what he wants the promises to do is to inspire you. Not to say, oh, well, everything's going to be okay, but to say, you know what? God has promised us many things, so why am I walking in unbelief towards him? Why am I not trusting him? Why am I not obeying him? And all these promises were to cause the people of Judah to really repent and line up. But of course, we know the end results, they didn't. Now, the promises that God is making to them are glorious. But again, it's made in light of the great chastisement that's going to come on Judah. And it is great chastisement that's coming on Judah. Now, God was not bringing wrath on his people, because it would mean total destruction. But he was bringing truly correction, a hard correction, a hard chastisement, and in the process, both kingdoms would lose their inheritance, which is the land, and they would be taken into captivity, and they'd have to become subject to other gods and other leaders, and in the case of Samaria, they were scattered. Now, the Lord's type of chastisement was in light of a future kingdom. His goal was to always bring his people back as a holy people that would accept their calling and be responsible for their calling. But because of their sin, he had to purge them. And chastisement is a lot of the purging that's going on. Because when they come back, they're pretty much a broken people. And so they come back to restore, of course, the temple in Jerusalem, and we all know that story. It took years for them to do it because they were so under it. They were under tyranny. They were under these leaders that could have cared less, and they had to keep going forward. And pretty soon he had to send his prophets in to say, if you don't get your act together, you're going to experience even some more chastisement. And so there's always this going on because God is trying to bring his people to a place where he can entrust them with his promises. And church, that's true for you and I today. He has to bring us to those places where we can be entrusted with his promises. And we have to accept our calling. We have a high calling. We're part of a holy priesthood. And we need to take that seriously. We got to quit saying, oh, well, yeah, I'm a Christian, I'm this or that. Are you truly accepting the challenges of being a holy people, of being a holy royal priesthood? Are you accepting those challenges? Because that is so vital, because that's going to bring the witness out that the people who are not saved need to see. Now, these people would be serving others. And I want you to know today, we're all serving something. And I hope everyone is serving God today. I hope you're serving God. I hope you're not serving the world or your flesh or whatever. I hope you are serving God. Are you going to fall down once in a while and give into your flesh? Yes. That's our selfish part. But you know what? When we realize we're giving into it, we need to step up to the plate and say, that's not acceptable. We are here to serve the living God. We're here to bring that witness and that testimony of the living God. But one of the problems that Judah had is the same problem the church has today. And that is, why would God do such a thing? After all, we are his chosen people. After all, we're this, we're that. And the Jews could not imagine in Judah how God would allow the city of the great king to be destroyed, how he would allow the people that were called to be a light in the world to be brought under. They felt that God's reputation would be tarnished, and so certainly he would not allow that to happen. But you see, God doesn't, he's not in the repetition, he's into holy people. We got to get a hold of that. He's in the holy people. He's in the people that, are really serving his point. Now, it's important to realize that if they had gone back to their law, if they'd gone back to the law, these people, Deuteronomy 28, they would know God wouldn't care about preserving the city or his temple. If there was sin, he was going to deal with it. So if you go to Deuteronomy 28, it tells them right there, if you don't do what I ask you, I am going to destroy your inheritance. You're going to be taken out of the land. Your cities are going to be destroyed. I mean, he laid it all out. He told them you're going to be scattered. He told them, he warned them in chapter 28 of Deuteronomy. Let me read you this statement. This is Deuteronomy 28:37. And he's talking to the Jewish people. He says, and thou shalt become an astonishment. He's talking about the people. You're going to become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword, almost a cuss word, among all nations, whether the Lord shall lead thee. He was saying, look, you go into rebellion, and I'm still going to be part of where you're going to end up at, but you need to know you're going to become a byword. You're going to become a joke. And I have to admit, there are some people who are enemies of God, enemies of America, that I said, Lord, make their name a byword. Make their name a byword. So when people say it, it almost like comes out with a hiss. And that's what he allowed his people to become to the nations around them, was sort of a byword, a hiss that came out of their mouth. Oh, yeah, Israel, yeah, oh, yeah. And he will do that. You put God to a foolish test, you're going to lose. And that's what they discovered. They're going to lose big time here. Now, John the Baptist, of course, they still believed this, the Jews, when he was running around as a prophet. And he told them, he says, God could make rocks into Jews if he wanted to. That's Matthew 3:9-10. He says, God doesn't need you. It really bothers me when I hear people like Christians say, oh, God needs me. I think, are you kidding? God is always going to be God. He doesn't need you. And he didn't need the Jews. He could raise up another generation if he wanted to. He was ready to do that under Moses. And Moses says, no, don't do that. He doesn't need us. Now, to be distinct, you have to live your life according to that call in your life, according to why you're here. You're here to glorify God. You're here to bring glory to God. And of course, the real reason we have to do it, here's a big one, is because God's holy. And he expects his people to be holy. Now, that's not my words. That's found in 1 Peter 1:15 and 16. He's talking about your conversation being holy. That's your lifestyle being holy. Your way of handling yourself is holy. And the reality is that God will not allow his people to continue in sin without chastising them. He will chastise you in sin. He will chastise you. And at first it might be a little tap. And then it might be a little warning. And then it might be this impression. And each time he's trying to get a hold of you, the impression is going to get deeper. And it's going to get tougher. And then pretty soon his hand's going to come down on your backside. Now it may be different for everybody, but I felt his hand on my backside. And it's a very humbling situation. And you would say, Lord, I'd like to avoid that next time around. Could you take a board to my head and give me a clue? Because it is a very humbling thing when God chastises you. It's very humbling. And I remember when I was, Jeanette and I both were being chastised. And it was 3 days his hand was heavy on us. And I mean, it was so heavy. I thought, I don't want to forget this. I don't want to forget this. Because it's really tough. Now, God doesn't need any of us. He can skip 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 generations if he has to prepare the people to finally be where they need to be so he can do what he needs to do. He brings forth his blessings on another generation who has in some way been prepared to obediently move into what the Lord has called them to move into. And a good example, and please hear this, he's called us to inherit our promises, okay? He has given us promises. He expects us to inherit them. And we see this with the children of Israel. Remember, a whole generation died out in the wilderness. It was the next generation that came in and claimed the promised land. And God will do that. God will do that. But he might take you through some hard times to get you there too. Now we will see in the second message, starting the foundation of restoration. He's going to start building this picture of restoration, in other words. In fact, Micah, if you look at this, we just got through with chapter 3, he's going to move from the destruction of Jerusalem, which of course started in 606 BC, ended in 586 BC, with the third one. He's going to jump from that to the last days. And we're living in the last days, if you want to know that. The last days of Jerusalem. Now, we look at all of this and we realize that we are living in the last days. And the last days is not like the end days. The last days have been around for over 2,000 years. They started when Christ hit this earth, walked this earth, and his ministry. That's when, especially his resurrection, that the last days started. We need to understand that, because see, we think, well, you know, he hasn't come yet. He says it's the last days. People, we have been living in the last days, because a year to God is 1,000 years to us. Okay, let's get a clue here. He's not, a day to God is 1,000 years to us, sorry. But he is not into time and space like we are. He inserts himself into time and he fills space, but he is not subject to it. We're subject to it. The whole last days are 2,000 years thus far from the time of Christ. When he came, and of course we know what happened to him, his ministry will climax when he comes back again. You need to understand, his mission was to die, but his ministry will climax when he comes back again as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Right now, one of his major ministries being the high priest, standing on our behalf in the courts of heaven. But when he comes back as the final judge, that's going to be the climax of his ministry. That's something to think about. Now, we call this age, well, we call it an age, we call it the church age. We call it the dispensation of grace. We call it a couple of different things. And it's the age where the Gentiles will rule. Please hear me. It's the age the Gentiles will rule. But when all this comes out, guess what? The Gentiles are going to lose it all. And guess who's going to be reigning? Christ. And guess who's going to be the major kingdom? The Jewish kingdom. So he's going to get into this. Now, what we're going to see is the Lord gave his people 4 wonderful promises through Micah. And here's a summary of them. I'm going to tell you where they're found even. He promised a kingdom, a promised kingdom, which will be seen in Micah 4, 1 through 8. He promised deliverance, which is going to be seen through Micah 4, 9 through 10. He promised a conquest, where the Gentiles will be conquered, okay? And that's found in Micah 4, 11 through 13. And he promised a king, which is Christ. And that's found in, of course, Micah 5, 1 through 5. Just gives you the idea. So let's look at 4:1, because remember, he is jumping from declaring this judgment to declaring the end days, the last days, what's going to happen. But in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow into it. Now we know that in the last days, when Christ comes, that Jerusalem is going to be the exalted city. The kingdom of Israel is going to be the exalted kingdom. It's going to be set on Mount Zion in Jerusalem, and people are going to come there every year. It's called the Feast of the Tabernacles, and they're going to pay homage. Every nation will have to do it. If they don't, they're going to pay a price. It's called drought at first. And so people are going to be flowing in here. They're not going to be flowing in to claim it like they are today. They're going to be flowing in to worship the Messiah, to give honor and credit to the one who's truly the King of Kings. And it's going to happen. And of course, Israel is going to be one nation at that time. So if you look at 2, and he says, many nations shall come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths, for the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. What a powerful statement. He says people are going to be flocking there to learn who God is. They're going to be flocking there to learn his law. And his law is mainly all about what? Worship. Honoring each other. And that his word is going to come forth from Jerusalem. In fact, his word is going to be all over the world before it's over with. People are going to know what he believes. People are going to know who he is. There's not going to be any debate like there is today. His word is going to be final. And so people are going to come from all over and say, we're going to go up and learn at the house of Jacob, our God. And what is important to him, we're going to learn his ways. You see, the problem today with so many Christians is they don't know the ways of God. They don't know the ways of God. That's why they fall into all kinds of heresy. They don't know the ways of God. They err in their heart because they don't learn who he is. And they don't make it important to know what his word says and what's important to him. And so they don't know the ways of God. But these people in this period of time, they're going to learn the ways of God. And they're going to walk in his path. In other words, they're going to be obedient. And they're going to walk in the path of righteousness. Why? Because he's going to rule with a rod of iron. He's going to discipline them big time if they don't. They're going to feel the consequences quickly. And what you have to realize is wherever people are not walking in the path of righteousness, they're going to be walking in the path of chaos. And he can't have that in his kingdom of peace. So he's going to deal with the rebellious quickly. So let's look at what it says in verse 3. It says, and he shall judge among, many people, right, and rebuke strong nations afar off. They shall beat their swords in the plowshares, and their spears in the pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. How many times have we read that in Isaiah, for instance? It's all through scriptures concerning the end days. They're going to quit learning war. How many of you realize that that's all we learn? Is war. War, war, war. Even though we ask for peace, 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 that's what we learn. Now notice how he says he will judge among many people, and he will rebuke strong nations afar off. Every nation is going to come under his authority. And if they don't do what's right, he's going to rebuke them. Now, one of the things that we see is people don't like where they live, but they're not ready to become part of the solution where they live. So they bring their garbage over to other nations instead of getting rid of their garbage and realizing that if they want something changed, they got to take responsibility for themselves. You know what's going to happen? Everyone is going to take responsibility for themselves. And everyone is going to take responsibility for what they're allowing their leaders to do. And everyone's going to take responsibility for the leaders that they follow. It's not going to be, I can't get a fair deal, so I'm going to go someplace else. No, you sit there and you deal with the issues as a people. You take responsibility as a people. There's not going to be any of this garbage we see today happening. You got a problem, you deal with it. You got a problem in your nation and deal with your leaders. It's not going to be all this other garbage. Now, it says that, but they shall sit every man under his vine, under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken it. He's talking about the Jewish people. They're going to live in total peace. They're going to sit under their trees, as they say. They're going to enjoy the fruits of their labor. They're not going to have to worry about somebody coming in and taking it. They don't have to worry about battling for it anymore. They're going to be living in peace. Now, this is what a lot of the Jewish people would like to do right now. But they're not allowed to. They have to be ready for war at all times. But they're going to be doing it when their king sits on the throne. They're going to be able to enjoy life because the Lord has spoken it as being so. Now look at 5. For all people will walk, everyone in the name of his God, and we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. You think that's in the millennium? No. He's bringing you back to what was happening then. Everybody was walking according to their God. Everyone was walking according to their God. And what he's bringing out here is that there was only a remnant that was really walking after him. In every age is only a remnant. Please hear me. It's not masses of people. It's not big groups. It's a remnant of people who truly follow God. And there's only going to be a remnant in this time of Micah of people who truly follow God. The rest are going to be going after their own gods. But there's always going to be those who walk in the name of their God forever and ever, okay? So in verse 6 it says, In that day, saith the Lord, will I assemble her and halt, and I will gather her that is driven out, and her that I afflicted. Who's he talking about? He's talking about the two kingdoms of Israel. He's going to bring them together. Now he's chastised them, he's scattered them, he has purged them, he's prepared them, and now he's going to bring them back together. Now we're seeing this right now. This is prophetic. Right now we're seeing this prophecy coming true because he is bringing the Jewish people from all over the place back to Israel. But guess what? They're dry bones right now. They're dry bones, and one day he's going to raise them up as the spiritual nation they're supposed to be. Right now, Israel is one of the most secular nations there is. Really, the people are. And so they're dry bones. But one day, he's going to raise them up. And they're going to have his spirit, the life of the Spirit in them. And he says, I will make her that halt a remnant, and her that was cast off, far off, a strong nation. The Lord shall reign over them in Mount Zion from henceforth and even forever. So he's going to bring the remnant together. He's going to bring the other Jewish people together. He's going to make them a strong nation. A strong nation. This is what he promised them. So you look at Israel, you look at their history, and you look at how much they must have clung to this hope in the days of the Holocaust and in many other days, and some have let it go, even though God has preserved them and brought them through. Now let's look at, as also he's driven out and her that I've afflicted, verse 7, I will make her, I said that right, halt a remnant, and her that was cast off, a strong nation. The Lord shall reign over them in Mount Zion from henceforth ever forever. He's talking about the Messiah here. He's talking about Jesus reigning from here forever and ever. There is not going to be any disruption like there has been through all these years of history. Then he goes to set verse 8, And thou, O tower of the flock, the stronghold of the daughter of Zion, unto thee shall it come, even the first dominion. The kingdom shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem. The daughter of Zion here is really Jerusalem. It's all about Jerusalem because it's the city of the great king. And it's from there that he's going to rule. It's from there he's going to take dominion over the whole earth and rule. And the Jewish people are going to be there as a great nation. And they're going to be inheriting all the land that he promised them. And a lot of that land can go into Turkey. It goes down into Egypt some. It goes over. It takes all of Jordan, all those other places. And they're going to inherit that land. God promised them that. And they're going to inherit it. There's not going to be any of these Arabs or whatever saying, it's my land. No, it's not. It's not your land. Never has been. It never will be. Because once God designated it to Abraham, that was it. You didn't have any claim on it. So, He says, why now, why dost thou cry out aloud? Is it no king in thee? Is thy counselor perish? For pangs have taken thee as a woman travail. He's still talking about Jerusalem, but now he's reverting back. Does that confuse you a little bit? He is coming back, because here he is given the potential of Jerusalem. What is going to be so, but now he's coming back to where they're at in the present day. He says, why do you cry out? Okay? Where's your king? Because they're going to lose their king. They're going to lose their king. He says, and where's your counselors? There's not going to be any counselors around, because Jerusalem is going to be totally destroyed. The temple is going to be destroyed. It's going to be just taken to the ground. And all their kings are going to be exiled. And some are going to be killed. They're going to die in foreign lands. He says, where's your king? Where's your counselors? The ones that counseled them were fools. And they're in either dead or in exile. He says, where are you? Because you're taken as a woman in travail. And what's he saying there? You're yet to give birth to your real potential. You've settled for less. And yet here's your potential. You haven't yet gave birth to that. You have no concept of it. He says, be in pain and labor to bring forth, O daughter Zion, like a woman in travail, for now shalt thou go forth out of the field, and thou shalt go even to Babylon. There shalt thou be delivered. There the Lord shall redeem thee from the hand of thy enemies. What a powerful statement. You think about what he's saying here. He's saying, you know what? You're going to go through this travail. You're going to go into Babylon, and I am going to preserve you, prepare you, and then bring you forth out of Babylon. Now that's quite a thing that he's saying here. And he says that I will redeem you from the hand of your enemies. Now here we're going to go in the future again. Oh wow. Do you have to do going back and forth? And he says, now also many nations are gathered against thee and say, let her be defiled and let our eye look upon Zion. He's talking about today. He's talking about how a lot of nations are gathering against her, Israel. And they're saying, look at her. What a silly, stupid little nation. We hear that even on our national news, of these idiots that call themselves smart, whatever you want to call them, come against Israel. And I think you have just nailed your coffin. You are under a death sentence. And they're saying, oh, Israel, death to Israel. Well, basically, this is what a lot of nations will say. Israel's not going to make it. Israel's going to be defeated. But they don't know something. They don't know God's for Israel. And if God is for something, it doesn't matter how many has come against you, they're going to be defeated. And this is what it's coming down to. Israel may look like a small nation, it may be mocked, but guess who is still behind Israel? And it's not going to be destroyed. Everybody who comes up to destroy Israel will be destroyed. Everybody that has cursed Israel stands cursed. Everybody who mocks Israel will be mocked in the end. It's just the way it is. So, do I know that Israel's secular? You bet. But you know what? God's not done with Israel. And I stand with Israel as a nation. I may not agree with Israel, but I stand with her as a nation because God is for her. And He's going to bring her forth in due time. And this is what Israel's promise was. You have to keep that in mind. But all these nations are going to be gathered. But they know not the thoughts of the Lord. Notice what He says. They don't know my thoughts. They don't know what I have predicted and prophesied. And it's not because they don't know it. It's in the Bible. It's because they choose not to know it. They choose not to believe. They choose to be ignorant and hateful and to be used by the God of this age to come against God and His people and His plans. He's saying, don't know my thoughts, neither understand they his counsel. They don't understand his counsel, what he said. For he shall gather them as sheaves into the floor. He's going to bring them in this judgment. They don't realize that what he's doing is setting them up so they can be judged. Now you and I know that. So he says, arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion, for I will make thy horn iron, and I will make thy hoofs brass, and thou shalt beat in pieces many people. This is what they're going to do. He's going to raise up his Jewish people, even when they're under attack, and they're going to come out being victorious. Now, we have read this before. And he says, I will consecrate their grain unto the Lord, and their substance unto the Lord of the whole earth. He has truly set them apart. And they're going to come out blessed when it's all said and done. Yes, 2/3 are going to be killed. But the third that come in as fire, as pure silver, redeemed, they're going to be blessed in ways that we can't even imagine. So now, here we come to chapter 5. It says, now gather thyself in troops, O daughter, troops. Now we're going back again. He has laid siege against us. They shall smite the judge of Israel with a rod upon the cheek. Who's he talking about? Babylon. Who's the king? They smite. Zedekiah. He tries to escape. They find him, slap him around a little bit, bring him back. He watches his sons die, and then they take out his eyes. Talking about Zedekiah. Zedekiah was a fool because he knew Jeremiah was right, that they needed to do what the Babylonian Empire wanted them to do, and they wouldn't do it. And of course, they were greatly chastised. He says, with a rod upon thy cheek. Now, but thou, Bethlehem, here comes the promise. Ephrathah, though thou be Ephrathah. Well, I thought that, but then I thought, I always get it wrong. Though thou be low among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall be he come forth unto me, that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth has been from old, from everlasting. That's Jesus being born in Bethlehem. So now he's pointing forward again to their king being born in Bethlehem. Now, of course, we know that Herod asked, when the wise men were seeking the new king, he asked where the king was supposed to be born, and they went to this prophecy of Micah. Therefore will he give them up until the time that she which travaileth has brought forth, then the remnant of his brother shall return unto the children of Israel. So it's going back to the reality that God will give these children of Israel up for a while until it's time to bring them back and totally restore them. And there's a time for everything, just like there was a time for Jesus to come into this world. Therefore will he... and he shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall abide, for now shall he be great unto the ends of the earth. He shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord. That's God's people. But Jesus also did this as man. He stood in the strength of the Lord, and he was great and mighty. Well, the Jewish people have this call in their life too, and so does the church. If you stand in the strength of the Lord, how strong are you going to be? Now notice it says, the Lord his God, they shall abide, for now shall he be great unto the ends of the earth. It's talking about how great the nation of Israel is going to be. To the ends of the earth. Now this man shall be the peace when the Assyrians shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces, then shall we rise up against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. Now the Assyrian Empire was gone by this time. The Assyrians represent their enemies. When the enemies come in, then he's going to raise up 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. Now that means many. It's an idiom, just like the 3 transgressions and 4 in Amos. It means many. As you study the history of Israel or Judah, you will see God raising up leaders. Zerubbabel was one of those leaders he raised up. He raised up Zechariah. He raised up Haggai. He raised up different people. He even raised up Cyrus. He raised up even foreign leaders so that the people of Israel, the people of Judah, could come back to the land. And so you see him raising up these people, these leaders. And that's what he's talking about. And they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword. In other words, they're going to defeat their enemies with the sword. And the land of Nimrod. What's the land of Nimrod? It's Babylon. It's Babylon. It's the land of Nimrod. That's where it came from. Okay, and so they're talking about that in the interest thereof. Thus shall he deliver us from the Assyrian when he cometh into our land, when he treadeth within our borders. And again, it comes down to the fact that the children of Israel will defeat their enemies eventually. The Gentiles, their enemies, they will defeat them once and for all, and they're not going to be able to come into the borders again. The victory is going to be there. Now it says, a remnant, notice the word remnant of Jacob, shall be in the midst of many people, as the dew from the Lord, as the showers upon the grass, that tarrieth not for man, nor waiteth for the souls of men. Now who's the remnant of Jacob? They are those that are still in captivity. But they have hung true to the Lord God. They have been dispersed among these different nations, but they're like the dew because they haven't let go of their faith in Jehovah God. And the remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles, which we saw for how many years? Quite a few years. For us, it's what? 2,000 years at least. They were in Gentile rule for at least a couple of hundred years before that. And so they have been under Gentile rule for a lot of years. You will be among the Gentiles in the midst of many people as a lion among the beasts. What's he talking about? He says you're going to raise up as a lion one of these days, okay? And you're going to defeat those people or those Gentiles. You're going to take them on. And that you're going to be like a young lion among the flocks of the sheep. You're going to be one that begins to guard the sheep, begins to take care of the sheep. If he goeth through, both treadeth down and teareth in pieces, and none can deliver. That talks again about the victory that the people of Israel will have. They are the lions. They're the young lions. And they're in waiting right now. But when the time comes, they will be raised up to what? Defeat their enemies. Push them back. Devour them. Now, we're seeing this coming. We are watching this coming. The attitudes of so many people throughout the world about Israel, it's all based on a lie from Satan, but they're buying it. And they don't realize that the judgment's coming, and when it finally comes, he's going to raise up his people, and they are going to be victorious as they have been in the past. They're going to be again. Once and for all. Thy hand shall be lifted up upon thy adversaries, and all thy enemies shall be cut off. Period. Now, whoever survives, people, this great battle called Armageddon, whoever survives it are people that did not come against Israel as enemies. So that gives you a pretty good idea what's going to happen in a way, because all these enemies that come against them, all these nations that come against them, not every nation is going to come against them. I can tell you right now, all the nations that have come against them, I think are combined in the United Nations. I don't think every nation is going to come against them, because some nations are considered lambs. They're set on the right hand of God. It's based on what nation has done with the Jews. I believe the United Nations is one of the biggest enemies, and I'm very interested to see what's going to happen to them. How they're going to be judged, too. I just have to say they're a bunch of fools. Okay, so here we have, thy hands shall be lifted up. It shall come to pass in that day that the Lord, that I will cut off thy horses. Now, one of the things that you have to understand, before God can restore people to their land, his people, he has to purge it. He has to purge things. And one of the things is a dependency that the world has on its ideas of being victorious. And he's going to purge that, because here we come to the purging. And you have to remember that. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord, that I will cut off thy horses out of the midst of thee, and I will destroy thy chariots. Why is he talking about that? Because that's how people look to the horses and chariots to be great armies. And if you go back to Jesus, to the law, they said to the kings, don't depend on horses and chariots. And of course, Solomon sort of got off on the bad track there, because he started building up his horses and his chariots. And then he says, I will cut off the cities of thy land and throw down all thy strongholds. I will, what? Deal with cities. What's about cities? It's man's independent rule of God. All cities are man's independent rule of God most of the time. And he often calls them back to the land. Back to the land, not to cities. Because people want people to go to cities so they can control them. But if they are farmers, if you do the study on World War II, you will find the people that survived the most were the people who were the farmers. The people who knew how to live off the land. The people in the cities were destroyed. They were brought down to starvation and all kinds of things. And this is what he's talking about. People look to cities. People depend on cities. People go to cities and not to God. And so he's going to bring down the strongholds of these places so that they'll depend on him. He will cut off witchcraft out of the land. There will be no witchcraft. Hey, mediums who run around and advertise yourself. Hey, white witches who advertise yourself. You're going to be cut off. Do you understand? You're going to be cut off. You're not going to be in the land when Jesus reigns. There's not going to be any witchcraft. Okay, and thou that have no more soothsayers. He's not going to have people running around tickling people's ears and telling them what they want to hear. They're going to be cut off. False prophets. Whatever you are, TBN, wherever, you're going to be cut off. Period. You're not going to live. You're not going to survive. You're not going to be part of God's kingdom in the future, or part of his kingdom in heaven as well. You're not going to be part of it. He's going to cut it all off. He's going to say, he's going to take down the graven images also, and he's going to cut those off. Standing images out of the midst of thee. There's not going to be any images being worshipped. It's going to be cut off. It's going to be purged totally. You're not going to worship any more work of your hands. What you created with your hands, you're not going to be able to worship it anymore. He's taking care of all the idolatry. I will pluck up the groves. He's talking about the groves that were often where people went and worshiped. He says, I'm going to pluck them up in the midst of thee, so will I destroy thy cities. A lot of these groves were built around cities and temples. He's going to take care of all of that. He said, I will execute vengeance and anger and fury upon the heathen. He's talking about those who have been enemies of his people, enemies of Jehovah God, such as they have not heard. Now I want you to think about that. They can't even imagine what's going to happen to them. They haven't even heard of it before. Remember what he says, they don't believe me. They don't believe me. What a tragedy, isn't it? Now there will be a great purging, as we see. All idolatrous places will be brought down, and he will execute his vengeance in anger and fury upon all those heathens that have brought such practices to the land. He is going to execute the vengeance. And you know, it's amazing. You sit and watch these people play these wicked games, that they're not trembling in their shoes. Because they should be. You know that governor, I don't know if you heard that governor of Virginia that was advocating, he's supposed to be a doctor too, advocating late, abortions as the kid comes out of the, womb. And he is in major trouble today. And I wonder if this is his judgment. He is in political trouble, and even Democrats are calling for his resignation. And I thought, you keep on pulling this garbage. I'm going to sit back and watch what happens to New York. Because it's coming. It's coming. And I don't think this guy is going to survive this. I think they're going to sacrifice him, the Democrats, to give a certain picture. Because I don't know if you know what happened, but in his, I think it's back in his high school, him and a friend dressed up. One was all black and the other one was the Ku Klux Klan outfit. And it was in the yearbook. And I mean, he is in tons of trouble, and he's trying to apologize, he's trying to do everything, but everybody is calling for his resignation. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens to this man. But, a lot of times, and this is what I've learned, is that he was the last. The last is usually first. The last is usually first, and the first is last. So I expect to see something happen to New York next. And it's just the way it works. And so I sit here and I sort of tremble and I sort of shake, because I have no idea what's going to come down the line, but I know it's coming. I know it's coming, and I know it's going to be major. And it may not be in the way we think, but it's going to have the type of impact that I believe it's going to have. And there's not going to be any doubt. So as we look at this, we're living in prophetic times as we're watching all this come together. And it's getting exciting. It's getting exciting. It's not that I'm looking forward to what might happen, but it's exciting. And we need to say, Lord, am I prepared? Because that's the only thing that matters. Am I prepared? Am I where I need to be? Because these people blew it, and I don't want to blow it. I want to be exactly where you want me to be.